Get daily updates directly to your inbox. Subscriber, thank you for subscribing. Cold not subscribe. Try again later. Invalid email. Gangster drama Peaky Blinders tells the tale of Thomas Shelby and his criminal gang. Mesmerizing and dark, the series is set in the streets of post-war Birmingham on the verge of the 1920s. But the fictional characters viewers have grown to love echo a truth that is just as dramatic, bloody and compelling as the BBC's weekly plotlines. Historian Carl Chin has researched the real story behind the glamorous series, and admits he is impressed by how much good the program has done for his beloved hometown, the Birmingham Mail reports. With its captivating cinematography, charismatic performances, and dramatic title, the Peaky Blinders series on BBC Two seized the attention of viewers and critics alike in the autumn of 2013, writes Carl, who began researching these notorious Birmingham gangs back in the 1980s. Stylish yet dark, it was set in the back streets of Birmingham after the First World War and told of the rise to power of Tommy Shelby and his criminal gang of Peaky Blinders. Fashionably dressed, they were named after the weapon they used in fights, the peaks of their flat caps, into which had been sewn safety razors and which were slashed across the foreheads of their opponents, causing blood to pour down into their eyes and blind them. And yet, Carl's research has shown it is highly unlikely these gangsters ever used razor blades in their caps, and that the name probably just came from the peaked hats they chose to wear. It's really interesting to look back at the mythologized version of the story and the reality, says Carl, who has written a new book called The Real Peaky Blinders. There was no real Tommy Shelby, and the Peaky Blinders were around in the 1890s, and yet the series is set in the 1920s. As for the razor blades, they were only beginning to come in from the 1890s and were a luxury item, much too expensive for the Peaky Blinders to have used. And any hard man would tell you it would be very difficult to get direction and power with a razor blade sewn into the soft part of a cap. It was a romantic notion brought about in John Douglas's novel, A Walk Down Summer Lane. But I can understand why the series producers use the name, because it's infused with gangsterdom. And I'm pleased the matriarchal strong women are a huge aspect of the program. I think most working class men were raised by strong women. The series is gripping and beauty shot. It has gained national attention and done a lot for Birmingham. Carl believes references to Birmingham pubs such as the Garrison and firms like the BSA help evoke a powerful sense of place amidst the fast-moving, thrilling plot. His research shows the Peaky Blinders were followed by a large pre-war gang called the Birmingham Boys, made up of a loose collection of pickpockets, racecourse thieves and pests who were gaining a lot of power. By the 1920s, when the TV series is set, a group called the Birmingham Gang emerged, many of whom had come from the Birmingham Boys. They went on to become the most feared gang in the country. My book is not about the series, it's about the real people behind the story, and their story is as dramatic and compelling and bloody as the series, he adds. The Birmingham Gang was led by a fearsome gangster called Billy Kimber, a former Birmingham boy who went on to become the most powerful gangster in England. In the TV series, gang leader Tommy Shelby is traumatized by the First World War, but Carl doesn't believe the war had such an impact on the likes of Billy Kimber. Billy Kimber deserted during the war, explains Carl. Although he and others in the gang may have been traumatized by the war, they were mostly violent men before the war. The fighting they did was vicious fighting. Kimber was a very intelligent man with a fighting ability, a magnetic personality and a shrewdness of the importance of an alliance with London. Whilst exploring these notorious gangsters, Carl wrote to author Graham Greene to ask about the research he carried out for his famous book Brighton Rock. Carl writes, in a letter that he wrote to me in 1988, he explained that my novel Brighton Rock, it is true, deals a little with something similar to the Sabini gang, but I have forgotten now what I may have known when I wrote it. In those days I used to go frequently to Brighton, and once spent an evening with a member of a gang who introduced me to a certain amount of slang in use and took me to one of the meeting places of his fellow gangsters. But the details are beyond recall, and would be no good to you. Carl adds, I thought it was very kind that he took the time to write back to a young researcher. I was quite humbled by that. While conducting his research, he found Many of the gang members' families knew little of their ancestors' shady pasts, simply because it was something that was never discussed. A lot of gang members didn't talk about it when they got older. They were often ashamed of what they'd done when they were younger, he explains. In writing the book, I'm not excusing this behavior. It's not about romanticizing it because, in reality, it was brutal. A lot of national newspapers become hysterical about gang fights, but it's important to remember they were nothing like the American mafia. These aren't admirable people, but I think it is a story that should be told.